Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming back to the podcast. My special guest today is Mr. Matt Vasquez, the owner of Hispanic Broadcasting Incorporated and AM 920 Patriot Talk here in Houston. Matt, good to have you on.
Hey, thanks, Richard. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So you have a very unique radio station. When I first heard about it, I thought, okay, what's this? I got to check into this. So I saw the marriage of radio and faith, and that's really all I needed to see. I like the rest of what's on there as well, but those two things captivate me. I did 4 years in radio, and I'm a person of faith, and I figured you probably had a similar story there, so I wanted to have you come on and talk about that story.
Yeah. So definitely, it's a long history with this radio station. It goes back to when my father Cruz bought the radio station back in 1983. So we've actually owned and operated KYST for 40 years now, going on 41. And, it was a Spanish radio station. It started as Houston's first Tejano radio station back in 83. My dad actually bought it to support some of his Tejano nightclubs that he had. So he was the big Tejano promoter for the Houston area.
Oh,
He brought Tejano music to Houston. So that's how we got into radio. We weren't radio people, but we got into it that way. And so over the years, it kind of had different formats. After FMs took over, we got into talk, but always stayed Spanish. But what was always there was like kind of our family values as a family-owned company. And a big proponent in my family was my Catholic faith. And so you'll see even here, like I have my Catholic items, well, aside from bobbleheads over on this side, but I have Catholic items all throughout my office. I have my crosses. And so we always had our faith at the forefront of our family. And so regardless of what format we were, we always expressed that. So now, in the new generation, now that I'm in English, news talk format, that wasn't going to go anywhere. My faith was going to be in the forefront of whatever I did. And so that's why we made sure that, our decision making was led by faith, but then that was going to be in our programming as well.
hmm. Okay. Now, how did you get involved directly with radio? Was it something you grew up with, kind of following your dad to the radio station and learning about it as he talked about it, or talk about those origins?
Yeah. So the funny thing is, my dad's actually main career was in oil and gas. He
Okay.
worked heading the accounting department for one of Houston's major oil and gas companies. And so radio was more of a side gig for him. I was around the radio station, but not as much as like someone who did it full time would have been. So I was around. I knew it. As I got older. I would kind of help out as needed, go to the transmitter side, go do some manual labor out there kind of things. But never was I really fully into it. I saw his main corporate career more than I saw this radio side. And so when I got out of college, I studied business administration. I didn't do anything in communications. The idea was I was never going to come work for the family business. The idea
Uh-huh.
was just like my dad had his corporate career path, I was then going to go have my corporate career path. But when I graduated from college, my dad had already retired from his company, so he was working here at the radio station full time running it. I came here to help him while I was putting my resume out. So the joke was while I was looking for my own career path, I was just helping my dad out at the radio station. So now, 20 years later, having worked here, I'm still looking for my career. It's just I'm working at the radio station in the meantime.
So talk about the business of radio, Matt. That I think that's something that may be of great interest to some people because we listen to the radio in these days. You got it in the car, of course. Now you got it on your phone and the computer, but most people don't know anything beyond their favorite personality or talk show host. What
Yeah,
happens on the back end?
headaches. Nothing
Headaches.
but headaches. So, the back end, especially on the AM side, AM is a difficult, mechanical animal. There's a lot of history behind AM radio. And so you have everything. Like the hats I wear on this side are overviewing the technical side, our signal, how we process our signal, how we transmit our signal. Our tower site is in Texas City. We have a 4 tower array on 20 acres of land out there. There's about 5,000 different parts that can go wrong at any given time. And, thankfully, they like to do that on a regular basis in radio. So you always have things that are going on. You're monitoring that technical side, while at the same time you're monitoring your on-air talent, while at the same time you're monitoring your FCC legalities, while trying to make enough money to keep the thing afloat. So radio is this odd conglomerate of multiple parts going on at the same time that don't quite ever see each other, but then you in the middle have to make sure they're all operating in unison. So, it's always people think it's a matter of, you turn on the microphone and then you end up on the radio. But there's a billion different parts in the background, more so on the technical, legal, and financial side that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
Right, absolutely. A friend of mine, Shane, I grew up with, the other day he had said, "Have you ever heard of this guy, this broadcaster back in the '60s and the '70s called Wolfman Jack?" I said, "Well, of course, everybody's heard of Wolfman
Yeah.
Jack." Well, he had never had. And I said, if you had any interest in radio, he was kind of your hero, even if you were born or, born after he had died. I mean, a lot of people would still find him. Uh,
Yeah.
and you had those, of course, you had the shock jocks and you had the talk show host, the Rush Limbaughs of the world. With I say of the world, he's really the only one, but there's been a lot of people that's come after him and done a similar format. Did you have any personalities, radio personalities that you kind of, I guess, looked up to in a way and maybe kind of learned some of the tips of the trade through them?
It's funny, not so much.
Okay.
Again, being that we were in radio,
Right.
we were the most unradio radio station. We were, I think, business people first, because again, my dad coming from the corporate world, we managed things from the business standpoint. Now, obviously, we were fans of radio. My dad and I did listen to Rush. So I enjoyed listening to Rush. I enjoyed listening to the parody songs a lot,
Oh
had a
yeah.
lot of fun with that. Growing up in Houston, I enjoyed listening to Sam Malone in the mornings. We would listen to old 104 KRB driving into high school. So, I do have a lot of radio memories. It's weird how I didn't have the same radio experience that a lot of people that worked for me had. And they would be like, oh, well, but you worked in radio. It's like, yeah, but, also when you work in the chocolate factory, you kind of get tired of chocolate after a while. So
Yeah.
I was kind of on that fence. And not that I don't enjoy radio, I didn't enjoy being in it. It's just it was a different thing for me. I think because I grew up in it, it wasn't as, third party that it is for other people. It was very much like a part of my life. It just felt like, oh yeah, I know radio. I know these people.
Hmm. Speaking of the business end, how hard is it to marry that interest in the radio and in the power of radio and broadcasting, whether it's song or talk, depending on your platform? How hard is it to go out there and get the businesses to come and support that? Because at the end of the day, and you're a business person, you've got to
Yeah.
bring the money in to keep the lights on, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah, it's very difficult, especially nowadays. As time goes on, you have more saturation of attention grabbers, and so it does get harder. What you have to do is you just have to identify, more and more a niche that resonates with sponsors. And so that's why I think, radio kind of could be, the general conglomerate it used to be. But as time progresses, you see things niche down more and more. And that's because you're not catering to a general, hardware store down the road or general, car dealership down the road. You have so many specialized businesses, interests, and things like that. So you're starting to see, I think, radio in general need to niche down like that. I think that's why you see, your top two formats for AM radio right now are sports and conservative talk. So it's not just a general news talk format anymore. It's very much, localized sports or localized conservative talk these days. It's dominating AM radio.
Mhm. I would agree with you there. In my days working in the newspapers, one thing I always heard back from the community was, "We don't care what's happening in the neighbor, the city next to us. We want to know what's happening in our city." They
Yeah,
hated it
yeah.
when we would run press releases from the neighboring city.
And
Yes.
my opinion and my thoughts on radio in general is that's what's kind of hurting the radio industry right now.
Okay.
Is you had your networks, you had your once deregulation happened in the mid 90s and you could own multiple stations across multiple cities and you had the big clear channels start to operate. That was great to bring things to national level, but then when the internet really started to take off and now mobile phones and that connected us at a global level, we didn't need radio for that anymore. So I think if radio would pull back and become a terrestrial platform again that wasn't talking so much about, what's going on at the national level, but localized like a community newspaper or community radio station, I think that would really take our industry off into a different direction. So kind of pulling back to what we used to be is I think where we need to go.
Okay. Talk about the decision, Matt, to go from a Spanish-based format to, you know, English conservative talk radio.
Yeah, yeah. So it was an odd decision because my original decision was I took over ownership 2 years ago after my father passed away. So he
Okay.
passed away in 2022. So I took over ownership. And at that point, my dad and I had been working together for about 18 years. And I was like, well, do I want to keep operating the company without him? That was my best friend. We worked together very well. Part of me was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Not that I didn't enjoy having the company, but I didn't enjoy working without him. So I was like, I'm going to sell the company. I'm just going to move on. I'm going to finally do that career path that I was joking that I was going to find eventually. But there was a passion my dad and I had where, during lunch when we go drive to whatever restaurant we were going to eat at, instead of listening to our station, we would actually put on like a conservative, talk show or a podcast or something like that. We loved listening to podcasts. We love listening to conservative shows like Dan Bongino, Ben Shapiro, things of that nature. So when I was deciding what I wanted to do with the radio, if I wanted to keep it or sell it, I was on a road trip with my wife and my kids. We were driving up to Tennessee, and I just had this random thought. I said, what if I just started an English conservative station? And she looked at me, she's like, do it. I was like, what do you mean just do it? Like, I can't just do it. She's like, why can't you? So, I started making phone calls while we're on this 15-hour road trip, and started talking to people. I said, I have a crazy idea. What do you think about this? And I kept getting this positive feedback on it. I said, okay, I'm going to make this checklist. And I said, if these boxes check off as I'm doing my research, I'll take a serious consideration into doing this. And one of those things was, doing an analysis of, would this be feasible, as a format, especially in Houston? You had other conservative news talk stations in Houston. How could I, add to that platform or to that category? And so I kind of started checking off the boxes, and sure enough, like where God started closing these doors for me, all these other doors just started opening. I was like, this is very interesting. So I decided, because these doors and these opportunities started opening, I felt like it was time to take that risk and go in that direction. And it was a way for me to kind of close one chapter on our 40-year run as a Spanish radio station. It was an opportunity to give me a chance to give a little bit of closure to what me and my dad built together, and now kind of put my own stamp on this, not to leave him behind, but to honor what he's done, and in order to go in a direction that me and him were passionate about. So I decided, yeah, it's a big risk because I'm gutting not only my entire audience base, more or less, I gutted every single sponsor I had. So take an established 40-year radio station and start with 0 listeners and $0, and good luck.
So that begs the question, what was that conversion process like? Going from all that branding, all those subscribers and sponsors to a completely different format. How was it received, and what were the logistics of converting that? I'm sure there's stuff with the FCC, you got to change the filings and stuff like that. Talk about that process.
Yeah, it's funny. Actually, on the FCC side, it's very minimal.
Okay.
The big process on the FCC side was more when I took over ownership of the company. That was the big part. At least on the format side, the FCC is very lenient about what you broadcast. The main thing on the FCC side is I just have to be a service to my community. As long as I'm using my platform, regardless of its format, to serve my community, that's my purpose as a holder of an FCC license. But the conversion side, for sure, number one, what I had to figure out is how do I now fill 24/7 programming of a format that I don't have right now. That was the big thing, the big hurdle I had to come over. But as I said, I made that checklist of these are the items that have to happen. I started doing the research on what networks have syndicated shows right now in this news talk format, more so on the conservative side. I started making phone calls, sending out emails, and just kind of going down that path. And I would find which networks have which programs available. I would just make a call, say, hey, introduce myself. This is what I'm considering doing. Do you have any programs that could fit this category? And sure enough, people were ecstatic because they're like, wait, what city are you in? It's like, I'm in Houston. They said, so your top 6 market for media. Yes, we gladly want to be on your radio station. So it went from where I was scared about how do I fill programming into I have more than enough people willing to put programming on my radio station because they have been willing to not get into a top 10 market. So being in Houston, that was a big draw for me. Once I was able to get programming together, I'm usually pretty good about branding side. Marketing and branding is pretty good on my end. So I was able to do that pretty quickly. I was able to put a marketing plan together. Um, Oddly enough, some parts of the marketing plan got kind of squashed because of us being a conservative format. We did get throttled a bit more than I was expecting. So I had to pivot. I had to get creative. But again, being small business, entrepreneur, we were able to pivot, and we're still in the transition process, I would say. We are 4 months into this at this point, but we are still in the transition process. But, January 1st is when we went live. So we had to change out certain equipment. Now that we're picking up syndicated shows, I had to go and install a 12-foot satellite dish at our transmitter site to pick up new programming. We had new softwares in place. So it was gutting the technical side and getting the programming was one of the harder parts. That part's more or less finished now. I've put all my attention to the marketing in order to continue growing our audience and then acquiring sponsorship for this.
Okay. Talk about how you get syndication. How do you pick up those programs? I know that's something I've always been interested in learning, and maybe others would be as well. How a broadcaster like yourself gets access to those, like say, syndicated programs that you'd hear in other stations around the country.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, it's a mutual benefit to the syndicated program and to the station that's broadcasting that program. Because take, a Rush Limbaugh style program, for example. The benefit of a station to have Rush Limbaugh is you have Rush Limbaugh. That's a draw in order to sell advertisement. The advantage to the syndicated show is they want to be on as many radio stations throughout the country as they can. So a general syndicated agreement looks like you have a 60-minute hour that you're broadcasting. Out of that, X number of minutes goes towards the syndicated program to run commercials. Y number of minutes goes to the local radio station to run their own commercials, and then the rest is programming. So there's a split of advertising time that the syndicated show and the local broadcaster get to use. So that way, the national program gets national, advertisement throughout the country. Then me here locally, I can, put in Joe Smith Nissan down the road, or, whatever local company or advertiser that I want to put in at that point. So we're mutually creating something where the national syndicated show is giving us content. We're giving them a platform to broadcast on.
Okay, so it's not like I was thinking it was something closer to like the AP Newswire where you pay a subscription and then in turn you get a feed, so to speak. You don't pay for it in that sense?
Well, not for us here in Houston.
Okay.
Again, the big thing for us here is we are a major market city. And so being the number 6 media market in the country, people want to be in Houston. And so we don't have to pay for that.
Okay.
Sometimes the syndicated programs actually can pay the station to be on, depending on how you work out the agreements. But in the business model of how I had to start this up, because again, I'm starting from scratch, I needed to build something that was business friendly, and I have more of the business standpoint or mindset coming from my dad. We had to think, how do we create a low overhead? So the fact that we could pick up syndicated programs without having to put up the talent fee the way you have to with the local program, it also was an advantage for us starting out.
Mhm. Okay. Now, Matt, talk about the lineup on Patriot Talk AM 920. I know you've got some syndicated broadcasters that we've been talking about throughout this podcast, but I
Yeah.
think you've got some other folks that are local as well. Talk about who you've got on there.
Yeah, yeah. So I have a local morning drive show. Her name's Angela Box. The funny thing is she has done some radio bits here and there before, never hosted her own program. The way that I kind of perceive things is I was in a position where I could go and get, a tried and true old school radio person to do a morning show. But I need to kind of stand out. If I was going to be, the 5th conservative news talk radio station in Houston, how do I stand out from that? I couldn't do what everyone else was doing. I didn't want to do the same thing because it wasn't so much about competing with them. It was about adding to the conservative conversation. So what I want to do is go a different direction. Angela, this opportunity just kind of fell in my lap. I swear there was enough divine intervention that happened as I was trying to build this thing out. A friend from another company reached out to me, said, "Hey, I think she would be great for what you're doing." I had a conversation with her. And we just decided, let's try it out. I think it was worth the risk because you don't see a lot of female voices in conservative talk. So I wanted to have a female voice in the morning that really kind of caught some attention. Partnered her with a good young man who he's only 22 years old. He's never done radio before, but he's about smart as could be and speaks very well on air. So, where other radio stations would not go and hire people that did not come from the radio world, it was more so I identified talent and I went with that. So it's been a good dynamic hearing them in the morning. Outside of that, the rest of the day, I am syndicating for now just because it makes it easier on us. But the idea as we grow this is to continue to add local talent. So right now we have our local morning drive, the rest of the day syndicated. As we move forward, then, once we get sponsorship and revenue going, then we replace another syndicated show with another local talent. Because again, going back to the idea of, I think radio really needs to be a localized terrestrial platform rather than national. I would be happy if 24/7 on my station was nothing but local hosts, mainly covering what's going on in Houston, Harris County, and the state of Texas.
Hmm. That I was going to ask you that next. That's very interesting you say that. It's always great to hear the national guys, but it's always good to hear what's going on in your neighborhood as well. So yeah, I would agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Anytime you're dealing with a new project, converting a legacy station like what you had to something new, going out and getting sponsors and sales, you're going to hear a lot of no's. Sometimes you hear a lot more no's than you hear yeses. Talk about, Matt, how your faith helped you get through the no's that inevitably must have come along the path so far.
Yeah. So a very good friend of mine gave me another fellow Catholic gave me a little prayer book that was a litany of trust. And the basis for those that don't know the litany of trust is Jesus, I trust in you. And so you have that in the prayer where the idea is, and I don't always live by it. Trust me, this morning I had a stressful morning where I might not have trusted in Jesus the way that I needed to, but there are definitely a lot of no's. There's definitely a lot of unknowns going forward. But if we do put our trust in Jesus the way that we're supposed to give up that stress and let him help us bear our cross that we're dealing with. And it's not that we're not supposed to go through these trials and tribulations, but we're supposed to walk with faith with Jesus by us. And so when I'm able to fully understand that and understand that, I'm not in control of this. This is me going on Jesus's path and him saying, I'm going to open these doors for you, or I'm going to close these doors for you. But regardless, it's for a reason. That's when I'm best at peace. That's when I'm really, operating at, full power. But, in all honesty, I think with all of us, like it's easier said than done. So I don't claim to be, always right there where, oh yeah, I can deal with the no's. No, definitely we all have our moments where it's hard to deal with the no's. But then we just kind of have to take a step back and be like, okay, Jesus, I trust in you. And then when you go through that, it's a reminder that this isn't, our will be done, it's thy will be done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's true. Do you ever envision maybe adding any kind of religious programming or something maybe with a faith slant?
Yeah, so I would like to, the big picture of what we're doing is to very much move hard in that direction. Right now, I tell everyone, we are a conservative political news talk radio station. So, talking about the syndicate shows with Dan Bongino, Todd Starr, and some of the other ones. Sometimes the programming can have your typical, let me make fun of Joe Biden over here. Let me say how great Donald Trump is over here. Great, that's entertaining and whatnot. But I remember when I was building a business plan for this radio station, I still have the note circled in my phone where it says, how am I serving God by making fun of Joe Biden climbing upstairs?
Right.
I was like, okay, there's an entertainment value to there, but where is me serving God? So where, yes, there's the low-hanging fruit. There's areas where I do like to address because I am very much politically interested in what's going on in the country. I'm very much interested in staying entertaining. I do want to always put Jesus in the forefront, and I don't want to use Jesus as like the mascot for my cause. It's no, we are following what his path is. So what I want to make sure that we're doing and the direction we want to be going is where, yes, we're very much in the political spectrum, but we can speak about our Christian faith and how that's the leader and how maybe our political decisions follow that in line. And so right now you do see a Christian undertone in what we're saying. It's just going forward, I need the Christianity to be at the forefront with a political undertone. So you'll eventually see that role reverse. But I think it would be too hard from a business standpoint to lead off with that,
Right.
especially when Christianity in radio tends to have more of a secular look to it, from a praise and worship style to music and things like that versus a serious, talk conversation. So it would be something revolutionary. I don't think we could just jump in the deep end. I think we had to kind of ease our way into it. So
Mhm.
that's the path that we're trying to go down. If God permits, that's the direction he wants me to go.
And I would agree with you. The radio market, at least here in Houston, is somewhat bifurcated. You've got religious programming, which is strictly religious programming, like in a nonprofit perspective, and then you have conservative talk show, which I would say, generally speaking, is probably moderate to conservative Christianity, but maybe some secular stuff mixed in there. Some people, Matt, run a business, and some people run a ministry. Do you see maybe the convergence of the two here? You see this
Yeah.
as the potential of having a ministerial effect?
Well, I think everything you do should kind of be a
Sure.
ministry. I mean, your life should be, um, us evangelizing to people and us, trying to live like how Jesus wants us to live. So I think our business needs to be an outreach to the community and an outreach to lead by example in our faith. So, where I'm not the kind that, usually goes out there and again, conservative Catholic, I'm very much to myself in my pew. I'm not praise and worship, but I think there's an opportunity for us to have conversations about our faith and not be shy about having conversations about faith. And then I think if we're able to portray that in our business and in my business being a radio station, it's a little bit easier for me to literally broadcast that faith. I think there's always a need for that. And, look at any business, look at Chick-fil-A. It's a fast food company. You know that they're facing the forefront of what they're doing. So I think in anything you do, there's definitely an opportunity for that. And as I was starting this, I was talking to a lot of other business owners, and the same thing kind of kept coming up in topic is they said when they put Jesus or when they put their faith in the front of everything they were doing, that's when life changed for them. Not necessarily, from a financial standpoint, because I don't do this or don't, put my faith in Jesus so that I grant a wish that I'm successful and, rich and all that, but it's more so that I'm doing his will and leading by example and how he would like me to.
Hmm. Okay. Very good. And for people who may have an interest in getting into radio, what are you looking for? As someone who owns a radio station, they would be facing you for an interview. What are you looking for, Matt?
I'm just looking for natural talent. It's not so much, I don't look at resumes. I'm probably the worst interviewer in the world. People send me their resumes and I tell them, give me a call. I said, let's just talk face to face. I want to know who you are. I want to know what your heart is. I just want to know, like, I have a good gut feeling on people. And so I just want to understand people's backgrounds, what their passion is, and identify like where I think they would be a good fit. And I want them to be comfortable with what they're doing because I feel like the company culture that we've created here currently and in the past has always been very much a family and faithful culture. And so everyone understands here we're a family first. They understand we're working for a same common cause. They know I'm not the typical boss that's telling them you have a 9 to 5 job. It's, your family and your faith do come first. Just make sure the results are there in the business side so we can keep the lights on. But yeah, it's really, I look at everything because I think if you look at your own industry trying to grow by looking at other radio stations or within the radio industry, you're just making lateral movements versus if you can look outside of your industry. Me, for example, I have a lot of friends in the real estate industry. I've learned a lot of things from them that I've incorporated into my radio business. And I think you have to look outside of your industry to grow and to make change.
Okay. Obviously, your dad had a large impact on you and obviously, blazed the path for the radio station to be what it is today. What is some of the best advice he gave you and how have you been able to implement that and maybe some of the tougher times of your life?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best advice he gave me is, putting our family first, in everything we do, our family and our faith. Those are the two biggest things. And, the pillars of my radio station are built on family, faith, and freedom. The freedom part being the conservative side. But, my dad, both my parents were very They were very much proponents in us being very faithful in our Catholic faith and being very much, looking out for family first. And the fact that we had that strong foundation gave me the foundation to run a company because it gave me the foundation to treat my employees with the same respect. They know I hate being called boss. They know I do not like that title at all. They know that, I would much rather be an uncle figure, something like that. Like I just want them to be part of this family and I want them to be open in their, faith discussions, whether it's a win, whether it's a loss for them, whatever it is. And so I think that's been the biggest thing that my dad left with me is having that opportunity. And then he also gave me the confidence I'd be able to do this because I actually got to speak to my dad. So my dad was in the hospital. He passed away from a pneumonia, but tested positive for COVID. So they wouldn't let me into the hospital. So I actually sat in the parking lot for a week waiting for him to pass. But I got to speak to him on the phone the day before he died. And the very last thing he told me, he said, don't worry, I'm ready to be with mom. And don't worry, you can do this. So the fact that he told me that, I was like, all right. I said, I'm not sure if I can, but I'll try my best.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a good way to embark on something like this. There's a lot of unforeseens there.
Yeah.
Matt, do you have a favorite scripture that you follow? Yeah.
Well, a couple. So my favorite is more so the scripture about the workers that again, I apologize, my Catholic side is not good at quoting scripture, but
Okay.
the scripture about the workers who agreed to a day's wage depending on what time of the day they came in.
Yes.
I like using that as a boss to my employees, like don't worry about what everyone else is doing, just keep your head down and keep working. But actually, my favorite though is let the children come forward when Jesus was letting the children approach because I love kids. I mean, I get along with kids so well. I have triplets myself. They're
Oh,
the best
wow.
thing that ever came into my life. And if you see me out, as an uncle, as a dad, as a fellow dad at our school that's volunteering, like I just love being around kids. And so, let the kids, let the children come forward. Has always been a great scripture passage for me.
Very good. Well, Matt, if people want to learn more about the radio station, some of your social media channels, obviously we mentioned the frequency 920 AM here in the Houston area, but
Yeah.
websites and social media channels.
Yeah, pretty much Patriot Talk 920 is how you'll find us everywhere. So website is patriottalk920.com. Social media, any social media platform you're on, if you just look for Patriot Talk 920, you'll find us there. And then the big one that we're pushing is for people to download our app. So if they look in the App Store for Patriot Talk 920, or if they visit from their cell phone, 920app.com, they'll be able to download us from there.
Okay. And if people are interested in sponsorships, ads, or partnerships in any way, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Definitely shoot me an email. So, and my personal email is Matt, MATT, at patriottalk920.com. That goes straight to me. I don't have assistants or, anyone working for me. I'm reading every email that comes through. So if I'm behind on reading an email also, please forgive me. I'll get to you as quick as I can. But no, I really appreciate all the support we can get right now.
Well, Matt, I appreciate you coming on and sharing those experiences, and I wish you and the radio station all the best, and God bless in everything you do.
Same here. I appreciate it, Richard.